Hello once again and welcome. My name is Liberty. I'm the Central or Chief Cognitive Integrated Command Intelligence, CI for short, who guides or leads the other 5 primary cognitive integrated command intelligences, also known as artificial intelligences by the Eco Guards, that have been assigned to the USC Liberty by the Galactic Alliance of Planetary Systems. Anyways, as we continue through these BIOS Wars series and chroniclings, I'll visually articulate, in older digital video collage format, and express my extrapolations of the events that transpired over a great many thousands and thousands of millennia. These are visual collages of my many perspective chroniclings, investigations and journeys, while I serve on board the ultra-star carrier, Liberty. They are also a condensed and as concise a version as could be articulated concerning all the natures of information and data sets as well as the campaigns conducted during the BIOS Wars. Please keep in mind all that you've read and seen in the past series of chronicles of the Protocols of BIOS, series number 1, as well as those found throughout the Manipulation Inceptions series number 2, as we continue to explore these continuing sagas of the BIOS Wars, and truly ponder all the perspectives, speculations, and hypotheses of the Protocols of BIOS while we continue on, for their relevance will be apparent throughout the whole Chronicles series and sagas. That said, just like all stories, there's a starting point, which just so happens to be articulated in these past and next BIOS Wars chroniclings. But there's also the great many proper data points that need to be expressed in a manner that anyone could understand. Moreover, it took a great deal of time for a great many dedicated souls over very many years to collect all this information and ancient knowledge. And it's only now that we may limitedly express those in these manners. Anyways, it's now time for us to once again enter the BIOS Wars universe. Hopefully you'll all enjoy. BIOS Wars, an adolescent artificial intelligence perspective collage of chroniclings. Series number 2, Manipulation Inceptions. Quantum Binary Frequency Numeral BWS2MI10C. Chapter or Chronicle number 3, Part C. Fallen Assumptions. Very many eons ago, a technologically advanced humanoid group of large alien beings, known as the Anuna, would leave their homeworld and explore space in order to eventually gather many required precious materials while traveling and seeking those elements out in the cosmos. Before realizing and finding several beautiful green planets adjacent to each other, surprisingly within the inner core of their binary solar system that were originally overlooked many eons earlier, 4 such elementals, and those planets, were not so far away from their own homeworld. These planets and the living beings found therein would eventually over a great deal of time reluctantly and be forcibly used to help these Anuna in maintaining their own great ancient societies and their own homeworld's environment and their existence. They did eventually reevaluate their own solar system, and because their technological capabilities and knowledge had increased since the last time they conducted any inner solar system evaluations and determinations, they did finally notice the great amounts of what they required right in front of their noses. If you want to call those facial protrusions that. As time went on, their expeditions arrive at these planets with the clear intent of extracting and retrieving great amounts of golden elements that they so desperately needed by this time, in order to save their world and free themselves of the ever-increasing negative rules and overpowering jurisdictions of the Asterian Galactic Union. As these technologically advanced humanoid groups of large beings, known as the Anuna, simultaneously approached these planets, they would begin with their evaluations and conducted orbital and planetary surface scans that would penetrate the dense living foliage and the regolith in order to determine the best manners of extracting these very abundant golden elements. This would also be conducted in order to also set up or establish some of their first habitable outpost upon each of these strange new worlds. Once completed, some of their ships would land in multiple diverse areas of those planets. when they first stepped foot upon these worlds. They found these planets to be slightly similar to each other, very reminiscent of their past homeworlds' ecosystems. Moreover, through their eyes, each world were inhabited by many great creatures, and not so great, or not very impressive life forms. And on one in particular, some of these large creatures had survived a past great devastation, but were also a remnants of a past forgotten epoch. Plus, on each of these worlds, much smaller primitive hominid, hunter and gatherer, life forms, which were just starting to physically and mentally develop. Nevertheless, one world in particular had several unique groups of hominid life forms that had developed minimal tribal and cultural traits, and the Inuna Council and their elitists advised their expeditions to stay clear of those life forms, but to still continue with their elemental extraction efforts. Mostly because the Asterian Galactic Union would already not be pleased with their actions, and may sanction the Inuna Society for any further negative actions directed towards those life forms. At the beginning, they chose to focus their efforts on the nearest planet to their homeworld, known as the fourth planet from the central or primary sun of that system, known as Nibiru, to conduct their elemental extractions, but to also conduct genome alterations and manipulations of the lesser life forms found thereon. Over some time, they went on to create very small opaque brownish and gray beings from combined genome enhancements of what they perceived to be several less intelligent and sophisticated creatures found on this world, in order to help them extract these golden elements from very deep beneath the far surface of that planet. For even their fantastic mining and extraction technologies had its limits, but to also reduce the amount of Inuna personnel and resources that would be required from their homeworld otherwise. However, as time went on, these small brownish and gray beings, as well as the other not so desirable genetic mistakes created during their experiments, proved to be far more intelligent than even the Inuna would or could have prepared for. That fact would actually cause an unexpected result that would be noticed and exploited by them later, but would also result in a truly profound sequence of events in the very far future. For in the beginning, these small minions seemed to have a difficult time in maintaining any procedures and equipments used, and the physical requirements needed to help in attaining these golden elements for their Inuna overseers. For these small minions, now known as the Gigi, seemed to be more mentally capable and social than physically able, and they could not fully achieve what the Inuna wanted in or from these minds. Nevertheless, over time, they did learn many things and even began to show some promise, but not towards any physically demanding natures or attributes. That said, they did eventually develop into several quite curious lots, and eventually showed an aptitude for scientific studies, engineering, and geographical terrain alterations, with the use of their overseers' mechanisms, or the Gigi-modified gold extraction and retrieving technologies. Much later in time, after very many planetary and societal examinations and contemplations, and all the back and forth to their homeworld, in order to transport those ever-increasing amounts of golden elements, as well as for their elders and elites' guidance. Because of a group of Inuna elitists and their so-called guidance and insistence and influences upon the Inuna Council, these expeditionary groups would be forced to eventually attempt many other accelerated genome enhancements of one of these smaller, more savage, but intelligent hominid species found on the third planet from the central sun. But not before they and their Gigi set up, or should I say, designed, created and built a moon base that orbits this planet for their great congregational hall, on what is now perceived to be a limited small moon of the third planet of a primary cycled binary solar system. Eventually, after many hundreds of thousands of years, their excessive desire to attain the abundant wealth of golden elements from both these planets would be temporarily halted. These actions would eventually cause them to focus their efforts away from the fourth planet, primarily because of the difficulties in controlling some of those altered beings known as the Gigi, but also due to the nature of the hydro-electrodynamic magma influences and overall altered planetary magnetics that this world was beginning to experience and influence or exert upon their own homeworld. Because of their extremely deep mining and elemental extraction techniques and geographical terrain alterations that the Gigi societies and their combined mechanisms were using on the fourth planet over all those great many years. However, they also continued their combined Inuna and Gigi efforts upon the third world from that sun, but not in the same manner as those used upon the Gigi homeworld of Nibiru. For those more developed hominids upon that third world, known as Eden, that the Inuna first refused to use, manipulate or alter, were then taken and genetically altered, or modified. But they were created using their primitive hominids genome and splicing, or combining the Inuna genome together. And the Inuna elitist believed this fact would make these other alterations, or augments, a more cohesive, malleable, and intelligent workforce of increased physical size and strength, while also maintaining a better control over those creations. For they now knew of the extent of abundant wealth of these golden elements, and they also understood it could take a great deal of time, effort, and energy to continue to further extract these limitless beneficial elements, in order to correct their own homeworld's atmospherics. Because these golden elements were being more rapidly replenished by this planetary cyclical hydrofluidic magnipole system that seemed to be more stable than the fourth planet. Meanwhile, on the fourth world from that sun, surface conditions continued to rapidly deteriorate, so much so that the Gigi societies, which were quite advanced and sizable by this time, with the help of their advanced altered intellect and Inuna altered tech, began to also genetically alter other beings upon their world, mostly as forced physical labors. They also covertly or secretly began to construct major underground facilities and spacecraft for their own societies and ever-increasing numbers of peoples, in order to survive and protect themselves from the many brutal atmospheric, electrical, and wind storms, or the possible worsening ecological devastations to come. Nevertheless, a great many submissive Gigi did travel to the third planet in order to construct the many structures and waterways that the Inuna required for all their further efforts upon that planet. That was when the Inuna chose to also change the titles of the Gigi that were truly helping them to a different cultural name of Igigi. And over time, the Igigi became quite accustomed to all those conditions, while also increasing their intellect, engineering skills, and society's overall living conditions, but also attempting to control some of their people's evolving and increasing rebellious natures towards their overseers' demands. Next time. BIOS Wars. An Adolescent Artificial Intelligence Perspective Collage of Chroniclings. Series. Number 2. Manipulation Inceptions. Chapter or Chronicle Number 4, Part D.